Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Black and Green Wednesday program of January 6th, 2021. The background to this program is the exclusion of small parties from equal representation and opportunity proposed their solutions during the 2021 campaign cycle, the 2020 campaign cycle. The program is co-sponsored by the Gateway Green Alliance, the Green Party of St. Louis, the Green Party of Missouri, Kansas City Green Party, the Kansas Green Party, Illinois Green Party, the New York Green Party, and the Universal African Peoples Organization. I am Carol Jackson. I am a member of the St. Louis Green Party and also the Universal African Peoples Organization, and I will be moderating this Zoom tonight. We have 4 people giving presentations of up to 10 minutes, and each we will have discussion with the audience. Before we move on, we have Don Fitz, who's going to take a few minutes and talk about the Capitol incident that happened, the unfortunate incident that happened earlier today.
Hi, I just want to remind everybody that the Democratic Party is just as responsible as the Republican Party for today's incident at the Capitol. I believe it was 2019 when Juan Guaido came from Venezuela as a right-wing disruptor and a traitor to Venezuela, and he received a standing ovation from the US Congress from both the Democrats and Republicans, and his tactic was exactly what was done today. That is bringing a right-wing mob into the government and trying to storm the government offices. Also, I noticed on some of the news today that they were, especially MSNBC, which is basically a Democratic Party news station, it said, repeatedly said that the United States is not a banana republic, which is a statement basically that Americans should think it's just peachy for the US to help right-wingers storm governments and destroy governments in Latin America, but it's a horror for the same thing to happen in the United States. And like Malcolm X once said years ago, sometimes in America, the chickens come home to roost. That's it.
Okay, is that okay? We're going to begin with our first speaker. That wonderful video that you saw, that was Betsy Mitchell, who's our first speaker. That was her advertisement, and it got quite a lot of attention. Betsy Mitchell ran for county executive as a candidate for St. Louis County in the recent 2020 election. She is a former educator and business owner, and she earned her undergraduate and graduate degrees from Harris, Stowe, and Maryville universities. And I just want to mention that I was Betsy's campaign manager and treasurer for her campaign for the November 3rd, 2020 election. So Betsy, you want to go ahead and start?
Thank you very much, Carol, and thank you, Don, for your comments. I first want to say thank you. That was about 3 minutes of my 10 minutes, the video. No, really, I really was very, very honored to run for St. Louis County Executive. When asked to run, I had no idea that it was going to be as challenging as it was, but we overcame that and did what we had to do to be able to run a smooth campaign that brought us 16,652 votes for St. Louis County Executive. So it let me know that I crossed over aisles and touched other and reached and got other parties, be it Democrat, Republican, or whatever. But what I found to be somewhat challenging was that when I announced that I was going to run for St. Louis County Executive, my thoughts were, I was very excited about it. I thought it was it was great. But I started to see a little opposition almost immediately. When I ran and I started calling friends and people that I knew to say, well, I was running for St. Louis County Executive, they were excited. And I said, and I'm on the Green Party ticket. And that's when I started to get a lot of slack and people started to sort of step back and they wanted to know why did I, why was I running on the Green Party? And I told them that a lot of things that the Green Party believed in, that's the way I felt as well. But that did not, I think it lost me a whole lot of votes of people that said that if I had been a Democrat, they would have voted. So, but anyway, with that being said, my opponent that I was running against, nobody wanted to, nobody liked him pretty much, Sam Page. So you would think that if it was a person that you wanted to, if you didn't like the way someone was running or being an administrator, you would not vote for them just because you didn't want to vote for somebody that was a Green Party. And I think in my case, that was a bit of the problem. I just got back a lot of people that said that they would support me. When it came down to wanting to support me, they said, well, we will do it, but we can't come out publicly and do it. Now, had they came out publicly and endorsed me, those people that was in my corner, but said that they had, that they would support me, but they did not want to come out publicly. Had they stood up and came out publicly, I would have had a better, I believe, I would have had a better turnout. But I got that. And so to me, that was the suppression at whatever level you want to call it, because these were people that you thought you knew and you thought had your back and believed in you, but they let the party and their party and what they thought that their people that knew them would think if they would vote for a Green Party, So, but with Carol and we got together and we said, look, we're going to run this campaign. We're going to run it with everything that we have in us. We're going to do everything we can do to get out there and to just run for the people and not for the parties. And so, as you heard my commercial, that people over party, and that was my thing. I just said it all times. It's not about the party. I said it's about people. I care about people and what and what we should do for people, and not so much worry about what party or who. The two party, Democrat, Republican. That's all you hear. That's all I heard. So many times, so many conversations. People told me, well, yeah, we think, well, we'll get back with you and next week, but we think we're going to endorse you. Okay. And then it would change. It was just one thing after another with that. So to me, there was a lot of opposition and suppression as well, due to the party that I was running, being a Green Party. I also felt that, got that same backlash from the media. TV, whenever they would talk about the campaign of who was running for St. Louis County Executive, I was never mentioned. Maybe one or two times, but it was just like I did not exist. And I was very much viable. It was actually, I was the only female and African-American female among three men. And so you would have thought, how could you possibly forget to mention that that there was another candidate, a Green Party candidate, So I found that to be at times very, very, it was saddening. At one point, I grew a thick skin because it just got to a point where I just knew they weren't going to mention that I was running, that it was St. Louis County Executive and Sam Page and Paul Berry, Republican and Democrat. That's all you would hear. And, and occasionally they would mention the independent person that was running, but rarely did they say Betsy Mitchell with the Green Party. So that to me, that was suppression at its best. And I think Carol can sort of speak on that if she want to share a few of my minutes that I have left. But overall, that was my experience. But if I would have to do it over again, I would do it again and again and again, because it did not stop me from believing in and doing and running the campaign like it. To me, it wasn't I'm going to run it as Green Party, I'm going to run it as a Democrat or Republican. I was running for the people, and I would do it again if I had to do it over again. Thank you. And Carol, you might want to add a little bit in, because a lot of times Carol would call and get on the TV stations or the newspapers immediately about it. So,
and so just to mention that, talking about viable candidates, there was Democrat who was the incumbent, a Republican, Betsy from the Green Party, and a Libertarian, which was non-existent. Okay, no one ever saw him. It was like, a dead person or something he hadn't registered. No one ever heard from him. Out of those people, everybody had baggage but Betsy. The incumbent, the Democrat, so many things were going on, FBI investigation and all that. The Republican just way over the top with evictions and bad cases and everything. And so they, basically would pick a criminal over a Green Party candidate. And a lot of times Betsy wasn't even on the voters' guides and the different newspapers. So I kind of stayed on all the media. That would be something I perused all, every day, all day when they mentioned candidates. And I wrote some pretty salty letters and emails and made some phone calls. And I kind of got rebuked by one of the Black newspapers. They actually came out and did a story, but it was very, it was derogatory on Betsy. So it was quite a challenge. Okay, so that's all I want to say, and maybe we can, talk about something later. And so without further ado, we're going to go to our next speaker, Mr. Oliver Hall. Oliver is the author of Death by 1,000 Signatures, The Rise of Restrictive Ballot Excess Laws, and the Decline of Electoral Competition in the United States. He writes for Counterpunch and the Philadelphia Inquirer. Oliver, if you want to go ahead and start.
Thanks very much, Carol. Just wanted to make a quick correction there. I've written things that have appeared in the Inquirer and Counterpunch, but I don't write for them. I'm with Center for Competitive Democracy. We're a 501c3 in Washington, D.C. We're a nonpartisan nonprofit organization. Our mission is to strengthen American democracy by increasing electoral competition. And translated into plain English, what that often or usually means is that we focus on ballot access litigation. We've done a ton of cases on behalf of the Green Party around the country. We also work for the Libertarian Party, the Constitution Party, independent candidates. Honestly, I'd be willing to work for Republicans and Democrats, but they don't seem to have the same problem with ballot access that others do. And so, we're very much focused on process rather than on any particular partisan interest. And of course, we have to be that way to maintain our nonprofit status. I didn't prepare any special remarks for tonight, but I would tell you about some of the litigation we did during the 2020 election cycle, because as everyone knows, it got massively disrupted by this COVID pandemic. And so as early spring advanced and it became clear that this pandemic was going to dramatically transform the electoral landscape, nationwide, worldwide, really, but we realized that it was going to be necessary to file some emergency actions. So I can tell you 3 representative cases, sort of a good, middle, and bad outcome, and which I think gives a good snapshot of where the federal courts are, both with respect to the COVID specific issues and also as part of a more general picture of the attitudes that federal courts take when we try to bring constitutional challenges to ballot access laws on behalf of minor party or independent candidates. So in the first case that we brought, and I think it was one of the first in the country, it was called Libertarian Party of Illinois v. Pritzker. The Green Party was also a plaintiff in that case, and we also had some independent candidates and voters involved. We brought a case challenging the enforcement of the signature requirements, among other things, as applied during the COVID pandemic. And in Illinois, as in most, if not all other states, the governor had issued lockdown orders. You weren't allowed to go outside except for life essential activities. And of course, collecting signatures for nomination petitions did not qualify under the governor's orders. So we brought an emergency action. We asked for a preliminary injunction seeking to enjoin enforcement of the signature requirement. There was also a notarization requirement that you got to collect the signatures in hand. You got to get so-called wet signatures in ink, in other words. The filing deadline. There were many other restrictions that, as many people on this call know, taken together really compound the burden of what is already an excessively high signature requirement. Well, this was, I think, the best case certainly that my organization won. And I think if I can brag a little bit, I think it was the best case. I think it was the best outcome of any of the COVID cases in the 2020 election cycle. What happened was the district court judge, Chief Judge Pallmeyer of the Northern District of Illinois, entered a preliminary injunction reducing the signature requirements by 90%, extending the filing deadline, enjoining enforcement of the notarization requirement, allowing electronic signature gathering, in other words, suspending enforcement of the wet signature requirement so that people could sign petitions in the comfort of their own home, photocopy them, email them back to the candidate or the party, and then collect them that way by PDF file or however it may be for submission. Ultimately, that may not have been as helpful as it might sound, but I think there's a lot of potential there, which is something I want to return to when I finish this little roundup of litigation. But that was really, I think, as I said, I think it was the best outcome of the many cases that were litigated in 2020. And as a result, the Libertarians and the Greens were on the ballot in 2020. And I think there were some independent candidates who were able to qualify as well. Then we filed a case in Maryland, and just very briefly, we challenged roughly the same requirements, the signature requirement and the in-person signature collection requirement, along with many other related restrictions. The result of that case was that the district court entered an injunction in our favor, but reduced the signature requirement by only 50%, whereas we got 90% in Illinois. And then the Maryland court, in fact, the Maryland State Board of Elections voluntarily adopted a policy, but only temporarily for the 2020 election cycle only, to authorize electronic signature gathering. But still, I think a big improvement over the status quo, especially given the raging pandemic. So that was the middle outcome. And then just to sort of put a cap on it, the worst outcome that we got was in a case that we filed on behalf of the Libertarian Party of Pennsylvania. And I'm sorry, I have not looked at this case in a few months. I believe the Greens were co-plaintiffs as well. But in this case, we brought essentially the same claims based on roughly the same evidence and the same facts. The general idea being that it's both unsafe and literally illegal to collect signatures during the pandemic under the governor's stay-at-home orders as applied at the time. And yet in that case, the district court declined any relief whatsoever and said, look, what's the big deal? Go out and get your signatures. It's a little harder, but you can do it. Ignoring entirely the fact that it was literally illegal to leave your house for that purpose for 75 days of the limited statutory signature collection period. So, just almost a 180 reversal from the kind of the outcome and the kind of judicial attitude that we saw in Illinois, where the court immediately recognized this pandemic places severe burdens on candidates and voters and parties that have to comply with these ballot access requirements, which are independent, above and beyond the burdens that apply in normal election cycles. Well, the court in Pennsylvania just would hear none of it. We did take an emergency appeal to the Third Circuit and lost there too, and faced, I think, a similarly dismissive attitude from the Court of Appeals there. The idea being essentially, as many people on this call may know, we did win a big case there about 5 years ago, which substantially reduced the signature requirement in Pennsylvania. It used to be based on a percentage of the previous vote for governor, and it could range anywhere based on whatever the outcome was in the last election, from something like 15 or 20 or 25,000 signatures all the way up to 70,000 signatures. So it was a very onerous requirement. We challenged that along with some other requirements and got a permanent injunction reducing the signature requirement in Pennsylvania to a flat 5,000 signatures. And, kind of perversely, I think that maybe that prevented us from getting the relief that we really deserved in 2020 based on the COVID specific factors. And I think the courts just took the attitude that, hey, you won a lot of relief a couple of years ago. What are you doing back here? I mean, that's speculation. I can't say what's in their minds, and no court actually said that, but you have to wonder what makes one judge in Pennsylvania, looking at essentially the same set of facts, take such a diametrically opposite attitude from a similarly situated judge looking at the same facts in Illinois. But that kind of gives you an idea of the range of cases that were filed and outcomes that resulted in 2020. Those are just the cases that my organization was personally involved in. I believe there were a couple hundred COVID-related election law cases, not all of them ballot access cases, certainly. And there was just a wide range of outcomes. And I think the idea is that courts just had no idea what to do faced with this. And in some cases, we got very good outcomes, and judges realized that this was a unique set of circumstances that warranted emergency relief. And in other circumstances, we had judges who, as they often do, really took no interest and had, I think, little understanding of just how hard it is to get on the ballot as an independent or minor party candidate, even when there isn't a pandemic raging and governor's orders prohibiting you from leaving your home. I think one thing that has come out of this 2020 election cycle that may be very valuable to minor parties and independent candidates going forward is this idea of electronic petitioning. It's a very new idea. It hasn't been adopted anywhere on a permanent basis except for Arizona. Here in the District of Columbia, there is a version of it. And the city of Denver also adopted electronic petitioning. Now, this will take some time, even after implemented, if and when it is implemented, for it to become truly beneficial to minor party and independent candidates. But my view is that we can continue challenging these excessive signature requirements on the same First and 14th Amendment grounds that we've challenged them on for years, and with some success, certainly. But I think that we really ought to focus on this issue because states are requiring minor party and independent candidates to demonstrate that they have voter support, sufficient voter support to qualify for the ballot, in the same way that these candidates and voters were required to demonstrate that support over 100 years ago when these statutes were first enacted, which is go out, stand on the street corner with your pen and paper and ask passersby to collect signatures. That might have made sense over 100 years ago when we had a dramatically different society. There was actually something called a town square. People would meet there, coexist, mix it up in the public sphere. But we live in a much different society today. And most important, the signature requirements are much greater than they were 100 years ago, because many of them are not a flat number, but are based on the percentage of the of the turnout in a previous election. So, when you're talking about a 1% signature requirement back in 1900, it translates to 1,000 or 2,000 votes. Whereas that same signature requirement today in a place like Texas translates to over 80,000 votes. So,
Oliver, maybe if you could maybe pick that up for comment or question afterwards. We have over our 10 minutes.
Okay, sorry, I didn't realize that. I would just say there's no reason for states to require minor party and independent candidates to continue following an archaic and obsolete, inherently burdensome and expensive procedure. We're in the 21st century. We ought to be using 21st century technology to be regulating ballot access in elections generally. And although it will take some time to implement successfully and to be used successfully by parties and candidates, I really think it can be an important part of opening up ballot access in the future. Thank you, and apologies for going on.
Thank you, Oliver. We're going to move to our third speaker, and the speakers, if you look in your chat, we have a timekeeper that's going to give you your times as they get closer and when your 10 minutes is up. So I really appreciate that. And Oliver, thank you very much for that information. Moving on to our third speaker, Richard Winger. Richard is an American political activist and analyst. He is the publisher and editor of Ballot Access News. He's on the editorial board of the Election Law Journal. Winger publishes analysis, statistics, and legal information and supports expanded access to the ballot for minor parties. Richard, we'd love to hear from you.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
Good. I was listening very carefully to what Elizabeth Mitchell was talking about and the media not covering her. And I just wanted to tell everybody that in 1990, the US signed a human rights document called the Document of the Copenhagen Meeting of the Conference on the Human Dimension of the CSCE. The nickname of that was the Helsinki Accords. And we and the democratic countries of Europe got together and put some principles that we all agreed we believed in. And here's what we and the other democratic countries said about access to the media. We all promised to guarantee universal and equal suffrage to adult citizens, to respect the right of citizens to seek political or public office individually or as representatives of political parties without discrimination. We promise to respect the right of individuals and groups to establish in full freedom their own political parties and provide such parties with the necessary legal guarantees to enable them to compete with each other on a basis of equal treatment before the law, and provide that no legal or administrative obstacle stands in the way of unimpeded access to the media on a non-discriminatory basis for all political groupings. These are fine sentiments, and the United States, having signed this, totally ignores it. In France, and I'm not saying this is the perfect solution, but in France, in a presidential election, the law requires all private media, not just publicly owned media, but private media, to give an equal amount of space to every candidate on the ballot. Now, wouldn't that be an amazing thing if this country did that? And one of the biggest problems that Howie Hawkins, and every Green presidential candidate has ever had is exclusion from the general election presidential debates. And there's some very influential people who are asking the US Supreme Court to finally do something about the commission and presidential debates. And we've got a petition in front of the US Supreme Court, and the Green Party is a co-plaintiff, asking the Supreme Court to hear our complaints about the commission and presidential debates. I don't have a lot more to say, but I will just, if there's questions and answers later, I'll be here.
Okay, great. Thank you, Richard. And our final speaker, Mr. Howie Hawkins. Howie is an environmental activist and a co-founder of the Green Party of the United States. Howie was the nominee from his party in the 2020 presidential election. He works to build a viable, independent, working-class political and social movement in opposition to the Democratic and the Republican parties. Howie, you're up.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be on with my fellow Green candidate, Betsy Mitchell, and probably the two best people, Oliver Hall on election law, equal access to the ballot. I mean, he cut his teeth on the attack on Nader in 2004, which was unprecedented in this country. Party suppression is a form of voter suppression. And Richard Winger's been on this for I don't know how many decades. But whenever I got a question, he's the first guy I think to call. We had a tough year. We got 405,000 plus votes. We're counting some more write-ins are still coming in. Kind of middling result over the history of Green presidential races. But we got to understand that what our candidates do, what our message is, how we execute our campaign is a very minor factor compared to the larger political context and dynamic, which this year was anybody but Trump. It was a referendum on Trump. And it was very hard for us to get a hearing from any side. Contrast that with, say, Jill Stein running in 2016 against the two most unpopular major party candidates in history for an open seat. So if you go through the history of Green presidential races, I think you'll find that is the case. So our vote total hurt us in terms of ballot access. We went into the election with 21 ballot lines. Now we got 15. And it's going to take hard work to get them back. And we ended up with only 30 ballot lines. That's the lowest we've ever had, except 2004 when we had 28. COVID was a part of that. Oliver talked about that. We had a primary, competitive primary. A lot of state parties were waiting to see the result of that. Got started too late. The deadlines were right on top of them in July and August. We had 3 Green parties not put the nominated ticket on the ballot because they succumbed to this anybody but Trump dynamic. And we got challenged by the Democrats, probably the strongest challenge we've ever had to ballot access, and got knocked off the ballot in 3 states. So that, substantially lowered our vote total. Write-ins, some states don't report them. Some of them don't report accurately. I could give you a chapter and verse on that, but let me talk about what we can do to improve the situation so we can have a multi-party democracy where we can compete fairly like the Helsinki Accords that Richard was talking about said our country says we're supposed to have. I think one thing is we need nonpartisan administration of elections. What other country has the governing parties administering their own elections? When we went into court or into these election boards and commissions, when they voted on whether we should be on the ballot or not, it was strictly partisan. The facts and the law were irrelevant. You know, if the judges were Democratic, they wanted us off. If they were Republican, they wanted us on. Same on these commission boards. It's totally corrupt. Second thing is, and this has been sort of on the agenda for a long time, we need a federal standard for ballot access for federal elections. You know, if you read Oliver's article, you know, until about 1948, getting on the ballot statewide was 500 or 1,000 signatures. And the increase in the requirements, as he points out in that article, started to suppress the Socialist Party after World War I, and then during the Cold or the Red Scare after World War II is when these numbers really got jacked up. So 500 or 1,000 should be the max for statewide office, 50 to 100 for Congress. And let me compare what we have in the United States, what they have in other countries, to run as an independent for the national legislature. In my state of New York, it's 3,500, which is a lot compared to other countries in the world, but not so bad. In Missouri, depending on the districts, it's 5,000 to 7,500 signatures to get to run for Congress. In Illinois, it's over 15,000. In Georgia, it's over 20,000. In Alabama, it's over 30,000. In Indiana, it's over 40,000. And in other countries, like you want to run as an independent for the Parliament, the House of Commons in the UK, it's 10 signatures. You want to run for Parliament in New Zealand, it's 2 signatures. You want to run for Congress in India, the world's largest electoral democracy, it's 2 signatures. It's 50 in Australia. Right next door to us in Canada, it's 100, unless you're in a rural district, it's 50. And here it's thousands or tens of thousands. And this is really party suppression. And it's a form of voter suppression. Most of our voters wouldn't vote if we're not on the ballot. We know from exit polls in 2016, 61% of Jill Stein's voters said they wouldn't have voted if she wasn't on the ballot. This is authoritarian as hell. I mean, it's hard to find other countries that do it. The closest example I can think of is Putin using signatures to knock off all his opponents in the Moscow city elections a couple of years ago. That's what the Democratic Party does to us. And they rightly complain about the Republicans suppressing voters by all, you know, particularly Black voters by, you know, onerous voter ID thing, voter purges, not enough polling places in Black communities and so forth. But the Democrats are guilty of this too. So we need a federal standard for ballot access. Another thing that happened is here in New York, they didn't go after our ballot access, we already had it. But they passed a law in the middle of the pandemic attached to the budget when nobody was paying attention that basically tripled the number of votes we had to get to keep our ballot. It used to be 50,000. As it turned out in this election, we needed 173,000 to retain our ballot in New York. The only people that ever got that much running as a Green was Ralph Nader running for president in 2000 and me running for governor in 2014. And so we lost our ballot line. And now they tripled the number of signatures we got to get it back on. It was 15,000. Now it's 45,000 in a 6-week window, which makes us, Richard maybe can confirm this, but I think it's probably the hardest state to get back on the ballot now for statewide. That is your liberal Democrat, Andrew Cuomo, who did that. And he targeted us because we got 5% of the vote then in 2014 running against him. So we got to do legislation, a federal standard, but we also got to fight for our state ballot access. And then the last thing is we have a single member district plurality system. And as Oliver pointed out in his article, somebody did a study of the 107 systems like that around the world, 90% of them are 2-party systems. Because the dynamic is, if you're not one of the 2 major parties, you're a spoiler. And they'll attack you for that. And people feel compelled to vote for the lesser evil to stop the greater evil they fear most. So we need, for example, in the presidential race, replace the Electoral College, which is a farce. I mean, Biden won by 7.1 million votes. and he barely won the Electoral College. If
Mhm.
21,462 votes, or as few as that many, in Arizona, Wisconsin, and Georgia had went to Trump instead of Biden, Trump would now be the president-elect. So the Electoral College got to go, but you can't just replace it with a popular vote because it preserves that two-party system. It needs to be a ranked choice national popular vote. And then for legislative bodies, including Congress, needs to be ranked choice from multi-member districts, because then you get proportional representation. It's a 10-member district, the winning threshold's about 10%. You know, Greens can reach that. A lot of parties can reach it. You'd end up with a multi-party system. There's actually legislation in Congress to do that called the Fair Representation Act that we should get behind. And the last thing I'll say is that I think ranked choice voting is an idea whose time has come. We got 5 more cities passed in the November election. We got the state of Alaska. We got the state of Maine. We got another 33 cities and counties. It's spreading across the country. And this is something we can work on in our local communities, in our states, as well as the federal level.
Is that it? Is that it, Howie?
Oh, there's a lot more, but I'm out of time.
Okay, thank you, Howie. On our next on our agenda, we're going to have a question and comment time, and maybe 2 minutes. And I'll make sure that I keep the time on this. And if you have any comments right now or questions that you might not want to do it in person on Zoom, you can type it in the chat right now and we'll read the question. Or if you have a specific comment or question for any of our speakers, we ask you to unmute yourself and direct it to them, or any comment you have. And we'll just take a couple of minutes to do that. And then we're going to go in order. Anybody, want to go ahead and have something they want to direct or comment, question?
This is David Black. I'd be happy to start. First, I'd like to thank Oliver. He got me on the ballot in Illinois and allowed 56,000 people to express their preference for the United States Senate for the Green Party. The anybody but Trump thing was very, very strong. And that's how I ended up getting many more votes than Howie Hawkins. So people were willing to vote for the Green Party candidate for senator, but not for president. Unlike many other Greens, I actually got a fair amount of media attention. I was not discriminated against in any way. I was in the debates for the US Senate. I think what really hurts us is how we just talked about, the fact that people are afraid to vote for a third party because it would be a spoiler. But I did get adequate media attention, and we just couldn't swing people from their traditional two-party system.
Greg Talapik here. Carol, may I?
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm the executive director for the Missouri Libertarian Party, and I appreciate the invitation. And I would like to echo what Mr. Hawkins said about proportional representation. We've been an established party in the United States for 50 years. We elected one person to a state legislature in Wyoming this year, after 50 years. And I don't know if Greens have anybody in any state legislatures, but to me, it is blatantly obvious that there will not be Green Party people elected to state legislators or Libertarian Party candidates elected to state legislatures or anybody else. There are many other people who deserve representation. It's not going to happen until we get proportional representation. And I favor when we start talking to people about it, we should ask for what we want. We may not get it, but we don't start out settling for, oh, it'll be nice if we can get 2 or 3 seats in a 163 seat state legislative body. We deserve representation according to the percentage of the votes that we get. And we should elect the entire 163 body as one, so that if 10% of the people vote Green, you should get 16 seats election after election after election. You should be getting, it should be, whatever percentage you think, if people knew that when they voted Green that they were going to put somebody into the state house, I'm not sure what you think it is. I think 10 to 15% of the seats would be Libertarian. But we do not represent pluralities in any single, you could not draw a district that libertarians represented a plurality of the vote. It's you know, there isn't out there. There will not be regular representation for minor party candidates in legislative bodies until we have proportional representation. Let's ask for what we want and see if we can't get it. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Anyone else?
Yes, Paul Lehman.
Okay, Paul, go ahead.
I have a kind of philosophical question. Since we are, these minor parties are such a small percentage of the population, what is the rationale for continuing to promote our ideals when they're not going to be received, or when the hill is such a steep hill to climb? Would it make sense for us to be focusing in other directions to to promote the Green Party or the Libertarian Party?
Okay, Paul, is that
That's directed to all three of the speakers.
okay? Howie, I saw your.
Four, I should say four.
Yeah, I would say we have to give voice to what the majority of people want. The platform that me and Angela Walker was running on is much more popular than what Biden and Trump are running on. We're for a Green New Deal.
Still on
And
it.
the last poll before the election said over 60% of the people were. We're for Medicare for all. Fox News did a poll, exit poll on election day. They called it government-run health insurance, kind of a negative way of putting it. And 72% of the people said that's what they want. We're for a job guarantee, 79% of the people. We're for cutting the military budget and putting that money into social and environmental protections. A poll in the fall said that's what 75% of the people want. Biden and Trump were against all those things. We're for it. So the people, we got to give them an opportunity to say what they want. And if you take that in, I'm not sure what other ideas you got. If you just go out and demonstrate, you know, the Democrats are the closest to us, they're going to take us for granted because we don't threaten their vote. And you go into the Democratic Party as a progressive, look what they did to AOC. She's always wanted to be on the Commerce and Energy Committee because that works on the Green New Deal and Medicare for all. And a seat opened up. She let them know. This happened a couple of weeks ago. And so the corporate leadership recruited a conservative Democrat named Kathleen Rice. And in the leadership body, the Policy and Steering Committee voted 46-13 and crushed AOC. So you go into the Democratic Party and you disappear as an alternative. So we got to speak for ourselves, even if the system makes it hard for us to get a platform in elections. The other point came up, you know, the brother from Illinois did better than I did. You look down ballot in the Green Party. We elected 22 people in 2020. We got some of our best votes ever. Madeline Hoffman running for the US Senate got more votes than any Green candidate in New Jersey, except Ralph Nader in 2000. Lisa Savage got 5% in Maine. What's her name? Paz-Muller in, Franca Paz-Muller in Baltimore, a city that's been a one-party dictatorship of the Democratic Party on the council for 80 years. She got 36%, the only competitive race in the city. And that's a good foundation for the future. We elected the mayor of Baldwin Park down there in East LA, Emmanuel Estrada. So we can build this, I think, from the bottom up. I think that's our path forward. When we have an institutional foothold in local elections, then we can elect people to state legislatures and Congress. We get a caucus in Congress, whoever we got for a presidential ticket will be hard to ignore.
Okay, thanks, Howie. Before we take any more questions or comment, I have one comment for chat and two questions. This is from Holly from Iowa. She says that she's interesting politics, often nearly evenly divided right and left. Some believe that has helped keep out corruption as well, but the LSB has been a great asset and has been very helpful to our state Green Party. I think they like the fact that we are not the usual thing. Okay, thank you, Holly, for that comment. We have a question from Jim Brown, and this is to anyone that may want to answer. Just hold up your finger, and whoever feels compelled out of our speakers to answer this. In New York, aside from a legal challenge, is there anything else that can be done to reverse Governor Cuomo's vote suppression rules? Does anyone need that to repeat it? In New York, aside from a legal challenge, is there anything else that can be done to reverse Governor Cuomo's vote suppression rules? And I think I saw Richard's hand up. Richard?
There is an effort in New York to persuade the legislature to pass a new bill to undo the terrible things that Cuomo forced them to do last year.
Okay, thanks, Richard. Okay, our next question is from Chris to any of our speakers that would like to answer this. Can the speakers address why it is so critical to hear all voices during elections? And the second part of this question, why is it critical to democracy? Again, can the speakers address why it is so critical to hear all voices during elections? And also, why is it critical to democracy? This is from Chris.
I could speak to that. And actually, I think Howie already gave a very good answer. For one thing, there are ideas and political policies and platforms that people want to support that are not being supported by the Republicans or the Democrats, who either oppose them or ignore them. So that's, a very obvious reason why we need more choices on the ballot. But I wanted to also revert to the previous question about, why is it important to run for office in the first place? Shouldn't minor parties and independents think about something else? Look, running for office is the consummate expression of your most core First Amendment values. The right of political association, of free speech, petitioning the government for redress of your grievances. It's all bound into one when you are running for office, when you are rallying like-minded voters and attempting to influence the public debate, if not actually win an election here and there. So, the idea that should be foregone in favor of some other priority, I think it's a hard sell, certainly for me, and I think many other people who think that these are core rights that should be exercised because we're Americans, and it's what the Constitution guarantees us the freedom to do. I would also say that when you begin to ask the question, why should we even attempt to participate in this rigged system when we have such an unlikely opportunity to prevail, and when the system is rigged against us? I think you're playing into the other side's game a little bit, because look, they're the ones who wrote the rules that rig the system, that make it impossible for you to have a viable chance. And then at the same time, they're the ones who say, if you do participate, you're going to be nothing but either a spoiler or a frivolous candidate. Well, which is it, right? I mean, either you are so, and I never use this term, I don't use it, I'm only characterizing it as the other, the Republicans and Democrats say minor parties are frivolous candidates. Why do they say that? Because they say that you don't have any legitimate reason for participating. That is an offense to anyone who has an abiding interest in exercising your First and 14th Amendment rights. But then at the same time, they say you're frivolous, you have no real reason for running. But then if you do run, the only possible impact you can have on the election is to ruin the entire thing. But wait a minute, you have no impact. You have no reason for being in the process in the first place. Look, I don't think any of these ideas should be countenanced. Everyone here, everyone as an American citizen has an equal right to participate. And if they think that participating as something other than a Republican or a Democrat is somehow a threat to the system that they themselves have designed, then they need to reform that system. The solution cannot be that millions of Americans should renounce their core constitutional rights and seek some other form of activity that might be also of some political benefit. So I don't even think that sort of line of thought should be given any credence whatsoever.
Okay, thank you, Oliver. And I've just notified to make sure that everyone know to look in their private chat messages. Make sure you look in your private chat messages. Do we have any other questions or comments? Or the speakers or any comments? Anyone would like to share anything? Richard? You're unmute. Unmute, Richard. Thank you.
I see a chat question
Okay.
from Sue to everyone. Can the speakers address getting money out of politics? And I want to recommend an idea that about 5 states in the country do. Some of them do it better than others. There's about 5 states that send every registered voter a pamphlet in the mail, and it has statements from every candidate on the ballot. And I'm sorry that idea isn't spread across the whole country. As far as making it illegal for people to spend a great deal of money, I don't support that idea. Some people start off in elections with a huge natural advantage. They're celebrities. They're children of important politicians, or they're big in entertainment, movies. And if their competitors couldn't spend more money than they do, it just wouldn't be fair. So I'm opposed to the idea of blocking people from spending as much money as they want.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Howie?
Yeah, I disagree with Richard on this one. I like the idea of what they call the clean money model, where every candidate who qualifies by demonstrating a minimum level of support gets an equal public campaign finance grant. So that levels the playing field. And in Arizona, where this is used, accepting the money means you have to get into a publicly sponsored debate, which is how Angel Torres, the Green candidate for governor, got in a debate in 2018, while I was excluded by Andrew Cuomo here in New York in 2018. Maine also uses this system. But what has happened is the Democrats have moved to what they call matching funds. And this is what they adopted in New York along with this party suppression legislation. And the excuse was, oh, we can't have all these parties, we can't afford to finance them, which wasn't true because it finances candidates, not parties. The matching funds goes to candidates. So they eliminated an 8-party system, and now we got a 4-party 2-candidate system, because the 2 parties that survived routinely cross-endorse the Democrats or the Republicans. Now, if you have a matching fund system, first of all, it doesn't eliminate private money. So you still have that big pile of private money that the very rich dominate with. And then the matching funds is a 6-to-1 match. It increases the disparity. If you're an upstart Green, you raise $10,000 that qualifies, you'll end up with $70,000. If you're a Democrat who's got $100,000 that qualifies, you end up with $700,000 after the match. So the difference between the amount of money you get or you have grows from $90,000 to $630,000. So this form of public campaign financing actually is a way of reinforcing the advantages of the incumbents. And there's pending legislation in Congress to do this that the Democrats have introduced. So watch out for the matching funds, public campaign financing. It really doesn't solve the problem.
Thank you, Howie. We have a comment from Don. Don?
Okay, I had to find the unmute button. Okay, I have a proposal for a campaign finance reform, which I think would blend the best part of Richard's suggestions with the best part of Howie's suggestions for campaign finance reform. And it's extraordinarily simple. There's two parts of it that are both very simple. One is that every person should be able to, and every corporation should be able to donate as much money as they want to any campaign for any office. And the second part is that money that was donated would be divided equally between all candidates. Then you do that and you don't have to worry about some magical formula. And then you could have a third part of it that says that all radio, that radio and television has to have a certain amount of free time to every candidate, both in the primaries and the general election. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Don. We have Connor who would like to make a comment. Go ahead, Connor.
Hello. Yeah, so not really about sort of shifting subjects back to like ranked choice voting, proportional representation. I am in charge of an organization trying to bring ranked choice voting to Missouri called Missourians for Ranked Choice Voting. We started in July and we are trying to get people on board so that we have enough people to run a petition drive to bring ranked choice voting to Missouri. If anyone is interested in joining that, I have posted in the chat our Discord and email address if you want more information on that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Connor. Did I see another hand up? Okay. If all the speakers have checked their chat boxes to see if there's any more questions or comments, if there are none, then we will move on.
May I have make one question, please? Yeah, so hi, this is a question really for anyone or slash comment. I think a problem for the third parties and smaller parties in America is that in our schools, you know, I was only ever really taught either Republican or Democrat. We were taught about the two parties, the candidates from both parties. And so I think when people get older, all they really consider is those two parties. Do you guys think there's a way that we can implement learning about different third parties in schools, or a way to reach the youth better than we can now?
I just want to, maybe someone else has a comment, but I just want to say one thing. When Betsy was running for St. Louis County Executive, she was invited. She's also an alum from University of Missouri, St. Louis, where she got her master's degree. And they had a student body that got together for, it was an informational kind of, not a debate, but question and answer, where different speakers, and the main speakers were only for, there were for other parties, for Green and Libertarian. And it was very, very interesting. And so there are a lot of universities that are getting much more progressive. And so that may be some place that they have that in their calendar. Betsy, do you remember when that was? Was that in October?
Yes, it was in October, and it was done through, was it Fanfan? I think it was Fanfan.
Oh, it was UMSO.
Pardon?
UMSO.
I'm sorry, you're right. That was UMSO. Yeah, they did have the program, and it was, like you said, it was the Libertarians, Green Party, Independent, and they wanted to know more about the Green Party, and I spoke, and I agree with the young man. I think that's something that should be a part of the curriculum as well. And, you know, as far as when you're talking about Republicans, Democrats, Green Party, Independents, it should all be, and in that way, you're exposed to it. At least you know what the Green Party is. You know, they will be able to learn about it and what it is that we represent. So, I mean, that's something that, as far as with curriculum, that history, that sort of thing.
And
So
so,
Department of Education, you know.
thanks, Betsy. And also, one thing we found out on the campaign trail, that people had no idea what the Green Party was, or some people had never heard of it. And, okay, can someone mute? I don't know who that is. So education is one thing, not just for young people. We found out that the young people were much more progressive. We went to a memorial ceremony, protest rally for Michael Brown, who was murdered in 2015. And there were a lot of young white young college students there, and Betsy had a chance to speak. Someone asked her to speak, and for Green Party for Canada, and they were very, very receptive. And was Zaki Barudi's on from the Universal African People's Organization that we talked about earlier as being one of our co-sponsors. And he had a newspaper, and we were able to give out newspapers that talked about Betsy and the campaign, and they were very receptive to read about it. So I think it's just a matter of feeding people, but probably more than half of the people, when we went out talking, they never heard of it. And then the people that did, they thought that it was, something in the sky, that was so far out there that, we need somebody that's on Earth. And so that's kind of the response that we got. So I think that education it has to start not just right before an election, but even when there isn't one, information about the Green Party and what it's doing. And Zaki can speak to one of our representatives that just got elected in first congressional district for Congresswoman. She started out sponsored by Zaki Barudi, that's on here, as she started out with her career as a Green Party candidate, and now she's a Democrat that got sworn in Sunday as a U.S. rep. So Zaki, do you want to say anything about that, or with how that, what you've done as a UAPO president?
Well, number one, I just have to correct you. Corey was not as a Green Party candidate, but we as an organization have had several Green Party candidates, including myself in 2000. In fact, just for historical sake, the Green Party, in my opinion, had one of the most diverse field of candidates the year that Ralph Nader won. Of course, Ralph Nader was Lebanese American, and the sister who ran as vice president was a Native American. I failed to remember her name, LaDuke. Somebody may want to help me on that one. We had Evelyn Taylor, who was a member of the organization running for a United States Senator here in Missouri, myself as governor. And so it was a very diverse candidacy. But to your point, in terms of, especially in the Black community and probably in many areas of the white community, people are just not familiar with the Green Party. So that needs to be an ongoing campaign to make sure that people are conscious of the Green Party. And that the name of that vice president candidate was Winona LaDuke. That most definitely would help as far as a ballot access, as well as people seeing an alternative to the Democratic Party and the Republican Party.
Thank you.
And so to that end, just want to publicly thank, of course, Betsy Mitchell, who in a short while in the general election for St. Louis County Executive was able to generate at least 16,000 votes in a short time on a shoestring budget. But again, it speaks to the whole process of educating people. As a young high school student, I guess, I made mention, it also needs to be a part of the curriculum in public education about the various political parties and given a history of minor political parties. So anyway, that's about it.
Thank you, Zaki. And people are ready. You know, we also had a lot of feedback that people said, we need another party. I don't like either one. So it's a good time to, you know, introduce people. Okay.
I want to say one thing about Betsy's campaign and thank her again, because Betsy ran, she generated enough votes that we maintained ballot status in St. Louis County.
Got ballot status.
Or we got ballot status. So that was huge. And I thank you again for that, Betsy.
Okay. Guess that's all for our questions and comments. And we're going to ask Frank Lawrence to take a couple of minutes. He's going to explain the MOGP signature campaign. Is there a part of signature campaign? Frank.
Thank you very much. I wish to take just a minute to thank the distinguished panel for their insights into this interesting topic.
Yeah, that was my last, don't steal my thunder, Frank.
Oh, sorry.
I'm gonna do it. I just wanted to get you, yeah, I got you.
But reports of the demise of the Green Party have been greatly exaggerated. We are the type of people that if we get knocked down, we pick ourselves back up, brush ourselves back off, and try again. The Green Party members represent value voters. And we vote, if you want my vote, you have to offer some change to the status quo or reforms, and not just a personality. In a better democracy, there would be many political parties to pick from, and they would be tailoring their platforms to meet the individual needs of the members. All politics is local, and our focus is always has been local, but we prefer to grow our own leaders, and we depend on, rather than depend on celebrities for leaders, we're constantly will be looking for servant leaders, not followers, in our area. And in U.S. history of politics, progressive changes actually bubble up from the bottom, not the top. And contrary to previously prevailing beliefs, the small groups of people are the ones that actually initiate progressive change in our society, and they're the ones that push it to the tipping point for the rest of the country. And sometimes as many as 3.5% of the people that are actively working on projects such as Medicare for All, they will eventually prevail. We will eventually have that happen. It's a no-brainer decision for our country. Progressive change has a wave-like motion, so it can't become discouraged if we have setbacks. So this is the nature of normal politics. So during this period that we're in now, the Green parties will be focused on a analysis of our present situation, a lot of introspection. And we're learning and adapting and adjusting to the world that changes rapidly. We will be planning our future programs and policies and things like that. And we're considering our many options. We're rebuilding our ballot access will be our primary task. And we're starting out on the St. Louis side and the Kansas City side where we still have some areas of ballot access that exist. So we'll be actively looking at the current coming up year to see if there's any opportunities to pursue some progressive servant leaders into those political races that may be occurring in the coming year. And then, of course, our more focus on the planning for the midterm election cycle coming up in 2022. And hopefully we'll grow our membership and have great candidates to run for those political offices. And we will get it done.
Yes,
I'll turn it back to you.
Yes, we will. Thank you for that information.
Carol, could I just, when I was talking about that very diverse ticket in the year 2000, I failed to mention another member, and it was so diverse in terms of, you know, ethnicities and gender. I failed to mention also Queen Zia Reddick was our first congressional district representative. So I've been remiss, she on land also. So I just wanted to acknowledge her
All right.
as a candidate in the year 2000.
Thank you, Zaki, for that reminder. Angie, are you on here? We're going to ask you to describe the next Black and Green program for February the 3rd. Take a couple minutes. Angie?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, but I cannot see myself. Okay, it doesn't matter. So the next Black and Green Wednesday program on February 3rd will be about self-sustained community development versus gentrification. So far we have 3 speakers confirmed. 2 of them are aldermanic candidates here in the city of St. Louis who are running in the 21st ward and the 3rd ward. Both of those wards are majority or almost 100% Black and are facing gentrification in different forms. So, you know, and we are hoping to get the speaker, and Chris is working on that, hoping to get a speaker also from Kansas City, Missouri, or somewhere else that Chris, you know, Chris knows. Questions that we will be asking is, you know, kind of to really give an idea about what self-sustained community development would mean, which means like how does a community have to look like that it's not I mean that it kind of involves the people who live there and gives a particular poorer and moderate income people an opportunity to thrive. You know, what resources do they need, and you know, things like that. Another question is, you know, because 2 of the speakers, Tichawa Masimba and Kalambai Bentham, are with the Uhuru movement, who are doing great work in the 21st ward at the moment. You know, they come from a background not asking for, but demanding reparations. So, and an idea of what they have in regards to reparations is to give, we have a large swath of land in North St. Louis that has been over time, over the last 50 years, basically been neglected and systematically depleted of all resources. So that's what they are facing there. And one of the ideas they have is to reform or to change the LRA into an agency that gives the land back to the people and also the resources to restore houses instead of tearing them down and stuff like that. So they will elaborate on that end also. And you know, then of course we want to ask what kind of steps would it need, and you know, looking at City Hall, what can be done there to get closer to this goal of a sustainable community. So it's going to be a very interesting conversation. Also touching on what exactly is gentrification. I mean, are we just talking about gentrification in regards to Black and white, or are we also talking about class based gentrification, because that is mostly the case. Oftentimes it overlaps. So it's going to be a very interesting conversation, and I hope that the person who will be able to join from KC, Missouri, may bring in a different perspective of, you know, of their struggles or of their ideas of what it should look like. Because Chris and I, you know, when we were preparing this, had a little texting a conversation about is this what does it mean, you know, kind of, do Black people want their own, basically their own land now and their own space because they're fed up with white society, or does it how can it be you know, or can integration, I mean, how could integration work, or with whom? So I don't want to, kind of get into that conversation now, but I just want to give you the scope of what probably the discussion would be like. The other speaker I forgot to mention is Wale Amusa, who confirmed, but I don't know yet, kind of how he will, what he will speak on, but he definitely said he would be on the panel.
Oh, yes, thank you, Angie. That sounds like something that we definitely want to be on. We're very honored that we had 8 co-sponsors for tonight's program, and so that's quite a feat to have 8 co-sponsors. And we want to thank all of our wonderful speakers and everyone that joined us. I think that it was quite informative, and we just really appreciate everyone being here. And to Donna's asked at the end, before we close, that if the Missouri people could stay on the Zoom. And some of you guys weren't on before, but I think it's kind of a big deal because we want to play Betsy's campaign commercial. And just to let you know, the commercial was written, the song was written, and the whole, the way everything was laid out by one of our Universal African Peoples Organization members, as well as the videographer was from UAPO. And Betsy's daughter is the one doing the singing. So for all of you, we want to say thank you again. If you just stay with us for a minute and just enjoy, because the campaign is over, but the song still rings in our head, and it's kind of a big deal. It got a lot of attention. So we're going to ask the YouTube commercial video to roll, and then for Don, after we come back, everybody doesn't have to stay on, but those that can, Don would like to speak to everyone from Missouri afterwards.